Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the channel, or welcome back to another round of Bases Picks. As always, please like and subscribe, share with a friend, a colleague, a relative, an associate, an enemy, any and all in between. It's appreciated. Now, I actually forgot there's a top rank card that's taking place tonight. It's not a particularly big card, but there are a couple of interesting fights I do want to touch on before we get to the main card here in somewhat sunny-ish Birmingham, taking place at the Resorts World Arena. It's about a 15-minute walk from where my hotel is, which is a result, but the cost of parking around here is not. But that's another story for another time. But yeah, let's get into the top rank stuff first, then we'll head over to the Birmingham stuff straight after. So, starting off the top rank card, while I'm not particularly too fussed about the opponent, young Floyd Diaz is on the card. I think he's like 11-0 with 3 KOs or something like that. One of their their interesting prospects. I do kind of want to see where he gets to tonight. So I'm not really going to give a prediction. He's very much in a building fight process. He's not really on the step up train just yet. A fighter that is though is young Troy Isley, known as the Transformer. He's taking on Javier Martinez, I believe, who I think is 12-0-1 at this time, and Troy Isley, I believe, is 12-0. Martinez, it might be 12-1, but I think it's 12-0-1. But Martinez is not a big puncher, neither is Troy Isley, so I can quite confidently envision this fight pretty much going the distance, although Isley does of more recent has been like getting in the pocket a bit more and has been a bit more willing to sort of trade, and you know, he has been getting a few more knockouts as of late. Martinez has got 3 KOs, Isley's got 5 out of 12 fights, whereas he's 3 out of 13. I do see it going the distance, but I'd like Troy Isley's very relaxed style. I do think at times he does take a bit too long to kind of get going, to go through the gears to sort of deal with his opponents, but he looks like he's been learning that steadily as of late. So I'm expecting him to come through this fight with a points decision, but a late stoppage wouldn't surprise me. After that now, you've got Andres Cortez against Abraham Nova as the chief support co-main event. Now this is actually a really good fight. Andres Cortez is 21-0, I think, with 12 KOs. Abraham Nova is 23-2 with 16 KOs. So there's respectable power on either side here. And if you remember, Abraham Nova in his last fight fought, who was it that he fought? Was it Rabisi Ramirez? I think it was. I think he fought Rabisi Ramirez in his last fight. Went the distance. It was a tough fight, Rabisi. This is, no, not Rabisi Ramirez, sorry. In his last fight, he fought Oshaki Foster, 130 pounds, that's it. And it was a highly competitive fight. It was a fight whereby most people feel like Oshaki Foster pulled it out the bag right in the last couple of rounds. There was a knockdown that he scored in that fight, which most people believe sort of turned the tide in his favor as well. So Abraham Nova, he's only ever been stopped once, and I think that was to Rabisi Ramirez. I can't remember off the top of my head, forgive me, but I know he's had one stoppage defeat. It was a 5th round KO, I remember that, I just can't remember who it was too. But yeah, Oshaki Foster was the last one. But with that being said, he's very accomplished. He's a guy he's never quite been at that elite level, but he gives anyone problems. And with Cortez, who's not actually that big of a puncher, he's gonna have to focus a lot more on his boxing skills to get this one over the line. And I think it's going to be a tricky test for him. I think his lack of punching power is not gonna deter Nova, and I think Nova's got a slightly longer reach, and I feel like I trust him more in those higher pressure fights. as I said, he's never kind of made it to the top and stayed there, but he's been at the top, whereas Cortez hasn't quite done that yet. So I'm actually predicting the upset on this one. I do think that Nova's gonna win. I think it could be a late stoppage. It could, yeah. I'm predicting a late stoppage. I think it's a 10 rounder. I don't even think it's for 12 rounds, but I know it's for some kind of NABO title that's on the line. But yeah, I'm gonna go for Abraham Nova with the late stoppage. So if it's a 10 rounder, say rounds 9 to 10. If it's a 12 rounder, then I'll say sort of rounds 9 to 11. That's sort of the prediction for that one. Now the main event is Rafael Espinoza against, I think his name's Sergio Centeno Sanchez. I did have a look through the record a little while ago. They've got a couple of common opponents, but neither guy has actually fought anyone of any note at the 130 pound division. So realistically, it's kind of a pick-em fight, but you do have to remember Robeisy Ramirez obviously did lose the belt to Rafael Espinoza, and that was a great fight. That was one of my fights of the year from last year. Espinoza just showed he kind of wanted it a bit more. Obviously 6 foot tall, 130 pounder. It's, you know, it's not often seen. Very gangly, very stick. I think him and Ray Vargas would be a great fight in the future. But yeah, looking at Sanchez's record and just seeing the kind of people that he's gone decision with are the same kind of people that Espinoza's actually KO'd. Now look, I know triangle theories is not necessarily a thing, but I just think with him being in the ring with Robeisy Ramirez, having gone through that acid test, which Sanchez hasn't yet, I do think that Espinoza's gonna win this fight, and I do think he's gonna win this fight via stoppage, because the one fight that Sanchez did lose was via KO, and again, it wasn't at a particularly high level. So I am gonna go with Rafael Espinoza to win via stoppage in about round 7 to 8. That's the prediction. I think just the range is going to be too much for Sanchez to try and get through, and yeah, I think that's ultimately going to be how this fight is won. So moving over to the Matchroom card taking place in Birmingham, first fight I actually want to look at is the Aqib Fiaz versus Kane Baker fight. Now this fight is obviously, to me, is the end, it's the main event of the Before the Bell section, and it takes significance because this is Kane Baker's final fight. He said this is his final fight. Now usually when a boxer will tell you this is the retirement fight, or they're thinking of retiring, you think, oh well, if the going gets tough, they're gonna kind of jack it in. They don't really want it no more. They've had enough. But someone like Kane Baker, I don't have those concerns. He is the kind of guy that is gonna bring heart, soul, blood, sweat, and tears into everything. And if this is his last fight, he's not gonna want to go out, like, for lack of a better word, a chump. So win, lose or draw, I think he is gonna bring smoke, and he's not gonna quit. He's not gonna think, oh, this is getting a bit too hard, I'm done. I just see him ready to, basically, he wants to ride out on a high, and know that he could have done nothing else in this fight. On the other side, you've got Aqib Fiaz, who lost his last fight. It was a shock loss, I guess, upset loss, especially as he had just kind of joined the Matchroom team. The team was high on him. He was one of those kind of fighters, from sort of Midlands, northern areas, where they were looking to kind of plant their flag. He would have a bit of a following behind him, and then the loss was a big upset. Now he's kind of coming back, so for him, he can't afford to take 2 losses in a row. And then you say, well, Kane Baker, he's his last fight anyway, so he's not going to want to go out on a loss. But you would think, well, the loss doesn't affect him as much, because I think his record is something like 19-11. But he's the kind of guy that's never actually been in a boring fight, and there's been several fights that he's lost where you could legitimately argue that he probably should have won or should have got a draw. So this is a very interesting fight. They were supposed to fight back at Matchroom Square Garden, I think, in 2020, and Aqib Fiaz pulled out with injury, I think. And I know Cain Baker was, he was really sort of upset by that, and he's always kind of wanted to fight because of that. So this being his last fight makes sense. Now, looking how the fight's going to play out, Aqib Fiaz is the definition of a pure boxer. Not the biggest of punchers, but he's a guy slick, likes to be on the outside, likes to control pace, bull and matador type scenario. Whereas Cain Baker, his nickname is Mexican, so you know he's coming forward, high gloves, like throwing punches in bunches, looking to sit on your chest. And that is the type of style that Aqib Fiaz hates. The pure boxer in general hates pressure fighters, but Aqib Fiaz, not being a big puncher, not wanting to have to work when he doesn't want to work, is all gonna kind of play into the hands of Cain Baker. Now, the way I see this fight playing out ultimately is the first half of the fight, Fiaz is gonna, you know, be looking slick, be countering well, you know, maybe at times even making Cain Baker look a bit pedestrian and, you know, looking like he's leagues above. But then we're going to get to sort of that fourth and that fifth round, and Cain Baker's still there, still coming forward, still sitting on the chest, still making the ref have to break them. Aqib Fiaz is throwing punches he doesn't like to throw. He's being jostled and hustled into throwing his shots. And I think the tide is going to turn from sort of the round 4 onwards. It's a 10 rounder, but I think from there onwards, Aqib Fiaz is essentially going to start having to hold on and trying to hold the lead, trying to nick rounds here and there to sort of preserve it. And ultimately, I don't think he's going to be able to. And I think this fight's going to end, probably maybe controversially, but I think it's going to end up as a split decision. I think it's going to end up becoming a split decision win. And I do think that Cain Baker's actually going to take the win when it's all said and done. So I could see a draw, you know, ending on a draw, as to not damage the record of Fiaz too badly, but realistically I see a split decision win coming the way for Cain Baker, with Fiaz doing very well in the first half of the fight but just not being able to maintain it and sort of getting taken apart on the back stretch. Moving to the main card, you've got Shannon Ryan versus Emma Dolan for the Commonwealth Super Flyweight Championship and the inaugural British Super Flyweight Championship for the women. This is a big moment for both women because they are the first women to ever compete for this title. It's been made specifically for this bout and the lineage starts from here. So they will actually end up in the history books, whoever wins, as the first person to win that belt, which is added motivation from the fact that the fight was ordered back in October. It was supposed to take place in February. Obviously, Emma Dolan had a chest infection. I thought it was an injury. She was actually said she had a chest infection when I spoke to her. Shannon Ryan ended up taking on Jasmina Zapatochna, which was, you know, for me, I felt it was a clean victory, but it was a tough victory because of the cuts that happened to Shannon Ryan in that fight. But she battled through that, not particularly being well as well. So all of that was just more and more sauce, just adding to the mixture. Emma Dolan is she's a very rangy opponent. Like, she likes to sort of stay on the outside. She likes to time her opponents when they're trying to come in, keep them behind the long, sort of a long lever. And then when they sort of do want to come in, either sweep that uppercut on the inside or push that straight down the pipe. And she's been very successful with that. She's very good with her timing from the outside, from distance, but she doesn't necessarily like to be jostled. And I think that's the moment where Shannon Ryan will have success. She's the quicker of the two. Because she's the smaller of the two, she can actually get underneath a lot of those shots, provided that she obviously comes in smart, a lot of head movement. If she comes in straight lines or tries to shoot off the line in the pocket, she will get timed. And potentially, if one of those shots comes when she's maybe trying to get it, jostle her feet, she may end up dropping off balance and could potentially get dropped, especially with the wide stance that she does use, obviously from a kickboxing background. But I don't predict that will take place. I do think that she's going to look for angles in and around the lead hand of Emma Dolan. She's going to try and keep her turning on the half circle, and because she's obviously got the smaller range of motion and gravity, she can kind of get to those angles quicker than Emma does. If she tries to sort of stay too far on the outside and try to ambush and box from the outside, she'll get picked off. So her best bet is to stay to mid-range to inside and stay on that inside and accept that, okay, I may take a couple of shots while I'm here, but because I'm cutting off her range of motion and her trajectory, they're not going to be as powerful, whereas my shots are going to be a lot more tight, compact. And I think that's going to be the tactic for her to get through. I do see Shannon Ryan taking this fight. I don't think she's going to get the stoppage. I know I normally say that I think this could be the one. I don't think this is going to be the one, because I think Emma Dolan is compact enough and defensive enough that she'll be able to ride through the eye of the storm. But I do think she's going to get overwhelmed, especially in the first half of the fight. And then maybe Shannon she might taper off. You know, the energy reserves might start to drop a little bit towards the mid to late rounds, but I feel she would have built up enough of a lead in the first half to be able to kind of see the fight out and see a unanimous points decision. Could potentially maybe be a split or a majority, but I'm going to go for the unanimous just because based on how I've seen them, I think that she is more kryptonite for Emma than Emma is kryptonite for her, based on what I've seen thus far. That's the prediction. I hope it comes through. I mean, I'm hoping that a stoppage would occur, but that's where I'm sort of seeing that one. Moving now to the what's the next fight on there? The co-main. There is another fight on Cameron Vong versus Jeff Ofori. Can't even forget that one. Now this is obviously a last minute fight. Now we know it's a last minute fight, but it's a banana skin fight. It was supposed to be Cameron Vong versus Jordan Flynn. Jordan Flynn got injured, so now Jeff Ofori has stepped in. Now this is a very interesting fight for the pure fact that Jeff Ofori, because he's getting sort of the late notice, he's coming up from a couple of weight classes below, which means he's not having to cut down the same amount of weight as Cameron Vong, and he's always in the gym anyway, he's always training, so he's always ready for a fight. In this moment, I think this is going to be one of those situations where Cameron Vong, just due to his size, is going to be able to sort of control the fight from the first half, but he's tight at the 135 weight. They're looking to move up to 140, I think, after this fight. Jeff Ofori is the kind of guy that's got energy for days. He doesn't stop. And Cameron Vong could potentially find himself in a situation towards the back half of this fight where he's having to not necessarily hold on, but he's struggling, or the pace is starting to get to him a little bit, and he's having to manage his output, and that will definitely give Jeff Ofori more of a foothold into the fight. Now, if Cameron Vong is able to get through the first 4 or 5 rounds, as I kind of see it, then he will win the fight on points. He will do enough to nick 1 or 2 rounds towards the end and maybe have like a 97-93 type fight, maybe a 96-94. But if Jeff Ofori is successful, has any success in those first 5 rounds, it could be very telling, and we could be looking at an upset. But I do think Cameron Vong is just about sturdy enough at this young professional age to be able to get through the first half of this fight with minimal problems, and because of that, I'm gonna go for him to win via a unanimous decision, but a very, very hard fought fight, especially towards the back end, with him realizing, yeah, maybe the move up is now, but he knows that he's past this level. Right, moving on to the chief support, we've got Lewis Crocker, who I believe is 19-0 with 13 KOs or 11 KOs at the minute, against Conor Walker, who I think is something like 25-2. I think he's got 13 KOs or something along those lines. Now this is obviously, he's in his hometown yet again, and Conor Walker is very much the upset king at this point. Obviously we saw basically what he did to, what's the guy's name? I'm gonna have to put it in the description because name's gone blank out my head, but that's fine. His last 2 fights basically have both been against guys that Matchroom tipped to beat him, and yeah, he's basically got his contract from those. I'm not sure how the length of the contract, whether it's fight by fight or Eddie is sort of giving him like a 2 or 3 fight deal, but he is in here. He's like, you know, sold, I think he sold about 500 tickets for this event, so he definitely has earned his spot. Lewis Crocker is a, you know, he's a solid puncher, you know, good fundamentals. He pretty much is, if you was going to classify him, he'd be sort of that boxer puncher. So he likes people that get aggressive so that he can kind of counter them. You know, he can box when he has to, he can fight when he has to. You know, tough Northern Irish, I think he's Northern Ireland, but he's very much, you know, of that mold. That he'll have a tear up, but he wants to kind of keep it clean until he can find his opportunity to take you out. Whereas Conor Walker is very much more of a pressure fighter. He's a smart pressure fighter though. He's not just a person that just barrels forward and tries to, you know, just tries to take your head off with every shot. He just stays close enough to you to make you, you know, want to try and tap his guard, to make you fight on his guard, and then he counters and he comes and he sort of comes at angles right in front of you, and he just sort of trades with you, and eventually, you know, he trusts his speed and his timing against yours, and for the most part he has been able to kind of get guys out of there with that style. By the way, it was Cyrus Pattinson that he was supposed to get beat by, and yeah, he cleaned out Cyrus quite nicely. So with that now being said, looking at this fight and looking at the way the styles are, usually the boxer puncher has the advantage over the pressure fighter, but because of the type of pressure fighter that Conor Walker is, I think that he may have a bit more of the grit and the nous. He's had a lot more professional experience, he's had a lot more rounds, and he's had to go through a lot more tougher tests you know, earlier on in his career. That's not to say that Crocker hasn't had tough tests as well, but I don't think they've been as tough. He hasn't really been the away guy as many times as Conor Walker has, and I think that's where the difference between the two lies. Also, I know in front of his hometown and his like fans, I just feel like Conor Walker is always going to give that extra percentage that maybe someone who's coming away from home is not really going to be prepared to put out. And being in that crowd with everyone cheering his name, being extra partisan, being extra rowdy towards Crocker and the small contingent of fans that I think he's bringing with him, I think the pressure from Conor and the pressure from the situation eventually will get to Lewis Crocker, and I think it's going to be a very spirited and hard fought fight. But I think it's a 10 rounder. I can see a scenario where it goes the distance and Conor Walker gets enough of sort of the rounds, the middle to late rounds, that he can eke out a decision, and I can see it being a split again or a majority. This one's definitely not going to be a UD. I can't see this fight being a UD either way. I think Conor Walker is going to get it via a split decision, but I wouldn't also rule out a late stoppage around about round 8 to round 9. But something tells me that that Lewis Crocker will see the final bell. So that's my prediction. I'm seeing, like I said, a split decision, majority decision to Conor Walker in his hometown once again. Now, moving on to the main event, Tyler Denny versus Felix Cash. Now, this is obviously, Tyler is the only true away fighter on this entire card, even though he is the champion and he will, ring walk second and everything, hopefully be in the home dressing room, but he is a boxer fighter coming on the Matchroom show. So you would usually think, well, even though, Matchroom are pretty professional and they've got, they have fair and impartial judges and referees and whatnot, but you would think, well, the home fighter is Felix Cash, so maybe he will get additional consideration from time to time. However, seeing Felix Cash at the weigh-in earlier on today, I wasn't there live, but I did watch it. Obviously having to strip down naked to make the weight. First fight back in 18 months. His last couple of fights, he has not looked that good ever since the Denzel Bentley fight. And funnily enough, you know, have to keep saying, ever since there was that quote-unquote issue, potentially Matchroom gym, like Conor Ben and everything, and some of the people sort of testing positive, you know, things didn't necessarily look the same with him. Punch power didn't look the same. Things changed. I'm not accusing anyone of anything, but it's just weird that your knockouts kind of stopped at that time when more and more testing sort of came into place. I'm just saying it looks a certain way. Also getting dropped twice by I can't remember the guy's name. I think it was a Russian opponent he had who wasn't even known as a big puncher. All of that kind of just looked a bit weird, bit suspect. Been out of the ring 18 months since his last fight. Tyler Denny has been active. His last fight was in November. He obviously wanted to be back out again in March, as you guys would have seen from the interview I'd done with him. But you know, he's now back out here, but he's been in the gym, he's been active. This is what he does for a living. He's not someone that balloons up and then has to crash back down. He's always in shape, always taking things seriously. Felix Cash is the bigger guy, he's the much bigger guy, and I believe he's gonna rehydrate and look massive in the ring tomorrow. But the one thing that I know Tyler Denny has over Felix Cash is work rate and engine. He can go for 12 rounds at pace as well. He's not going to be concerned about lasting the distance. So from round 1 to round 12, he can keep a consistent pace and he can keep a consistent work rate. I think Felix Cash is going to be looking to try and take him out early, and he's going to try and take him out with precision, hard shots in the first couple of rounds. I can see Tyler Denny having to wear a couple of really hard counter punches in those first couple of rounds just before he gets his timing and his head movement working correctly. But provided he survives those, which I think he will, I think he's hardened to certain punches now. And even though he's not particularly a big puncher himself, he's got a style whereby the head can come in at the same time as the shot does. I don't think he's not necessarily like he's not a Josh Warrington with the head, but head clashes do happen, especially with him from that southpaw stance coming in, shooting over the front foot the way that he does. And I can see several scenarios where he gets onto the chest of Felix Cash and just works away and works diligently, especially from sort of round 3-4 onwards. And I think Felix Cash, his gas tank, I think it's going to run empty from about round 7, round 8, and Tyler Denny's still going to be there working. I think he's not really known for knockouts, but I think he's going to be able to grind Felix Cash down to the point where by the time round 9, round 10 comes, Cash is just spent, just basically hanging on. And I see a scenario where maybe Adam Booth throws in a towel, maybe, you know, round 10, round 11, or Felix Cash maybe just takes a barrage of punches against the ropes, and maybe the referee jumps in just seeing he hasn't really got much left. I legitimately do see Tyler Denny getting a stoppage in this fight. I don't often say that about Tyler Denny, but I think just the work rate and the lack of fitness that Felix has got for that 12 round, you know, sort of that 12 round burst. And if anything, you know that if you go in the Matchroom gym, their fighters are fit. Whereas Adam Booth fighters are front runners. They're fire starters. They're good at the start, but then they start to fade because they're all about fast twitch fibers and explosive movements. That's not going to work in Cash's favor, having 18 months out the ring against someone like Tyler Denny. So yeah, I really do see that stoppage coming sort of rounds 10 to 11. I could be horribly wrong, but that's the way I'm playing it. So let me know how you guys think these fights are going to go overall. Those are my picks. Let me know yours down in the comment section. Don't forget to like, subscribe and share. But for right now, that's Basis Picks. Locked.